Right, grade 11s, I want us to just look together at eugenics. We've been working on this since the end of February, so by now it should be very familiar to you. The first thing I want you to realize is that when we look at eugenics in Nazi Germany, there's two aspects. One, there's the theory. So when we speak about eugenics, we have to understand what is the theory of eugenics, what is it about. So Oxford and textbooks, Oxford and Focus set that out for you. But you have to look for definitions like social Darwinism, scientific racism, the theory, the definitions. Remember, stuck in between your notes before eugenics in Nazi Germany is the story of Australia's social Darwinism. So go back, find the sections that explain what is social Darwinism, what is scientific racism, what is eugenics, and make sure you can define those concepts. Then we can turn our attention to Nazi Germany. And in Nazi Germany, Focus puts it beautifully from page 173 to 199. We can use Oxford as well. We've answered questions from there as well. But for an overview, that's brilliant. So when we look at Nazi Germany, there's various aspects to it. So first we have to look out for the rise of Hitler. And so we know about the Enabling Act and that he then took control of government using the Enabling Act. Then we look at the consolidation of his power. How did he set himself up as a dictator, as the Führer? And then we look at the concept of the Aryan race, the master race. And what we're looking for there is to see how the notion was that they were pure people and they were unpure people, and therefore it was justified according to the theories of eugenics, not according to our own moral code, to eliminate those who were not pure. And then you would have a Herrenvolk, a master race. We must understand that anti-Semitic refers to a hatred of Jewish people. It's not only in the Nazi Germans who were anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitic beliefs are found in today's society, sadly, and they date back to biblical times. Then we look for genocide, which is mass murder, and genocide was practiced in the Holocaust, where 6 million Jewish people died, and culminating in the final solution at the Wannsee Conference, where it was decided that there needed to be an increase in the rate of murder, the rate of genocide, to ensure an elimination of the undesirables. And then we look for the labor and extermination camps and what the conditions were like in those concentration camps or extermination camps. One of the things that you would have looked at on your own, because we had not gotten to it by the time school broke up, was choices that people have. And this is very interesting because it doesn't just teach us about Nazi Germany, it teaches us about ourselves and about society in general. Because in any situation, we can react in our own choices. So one could be a collaborator. You are guilty of betraying others or working with an enemy. You could be a bystander. You observe, you don't get involved. You know something's wrong, but you don't get involved. You could be a perpetrator. Now, this is an important word. We use it in matric as well. A person who commits, always responsible for something that is morally wrong. Could be a criminal, is a perpetrator of a human rights abuse. Then, very important, I wanted to remind you about the difference between the Nuremberg laws and the Nuremberg trials. They're easy to confuse. The Nuremberg laws were drawn up to discriminate against Jewish people in Nazi Germany. The Nuremberg trials were held after World War II to put on trial those who were guilty of human rights abuses, your generals, your leaders of the Nazi Germany state. And there they used retributive justice, that is an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. You should be killed if you were guilty of killing others. They didn't use restorative justice, which is an approach that South Africa took in the aftermath of apartheid, which is where you try to restore relations. And so we must make sure we don't get those two confused. So when we look at eugenics, I want to remind you then of a set of notes I'd given you. It had at the top understanding scientific racism with a little squiggle added by one of my children. And I had asked you then to recognize that that was the theory section. Then there were these handwritten notes of how we were going to write up our summaries. Now that I then typed up for you when lockdown began. It's on the D6. You received it on those 2 days in March, and it was put on the group. So you made notes, you did those activities, and then once all of that was done, I want to remind you that there are some summaries at the back of those notes that you can use to see what are the important things you need to know about. And you'll see there are page references now and again, so that you can work through that. This is a very useful note. These are some of the main definitions that I've covered now in this presentation. So go and look for that. And then you'll see there are some additional notes with this poem that I find so precious. And you'll see there are activities there if you'd like to do them, and there is more information, some sources. Maybe those sources would come up in an assessment, and then there's information on the Holocaust. That's very useful, and some activities if you want to do them. And there is the concentration camps and more activities. So if you could just go and have a look for those notes so that you can work through those to add to your understanding. But please remember that it's very important. We've had weeks and weeks to get through these activities. The memos are on the D6, so if you can, please try and mark that work and add in the correct answers where yours are a bit different, so that you know that that's done. And then just a reminder of the summary I've given you on the D6 and the WhatsApp group that sets out where you're supposed to be right now. That means eugenics is a very interesting section. It's a very thought-provoking section, and I hope you've enjoyed doing that section tremendously. Right, remember, ladies, that you are smart and you are loved. Go well.